Now, back in the browser, let's refresh a few times. So look, the timestamp is changing. This only happens in development mode. So look, it was rendered. Now, back in the browser, let's refresh a few times. So look, the timestamp is changing. This only happens in development mode. But if you build this application for production, you will see that the timestamp is not going to change because Next.js will treat this page as a static page. And here's the reason. Earlier, I told you that by default, whenever we use the fetch function, Next.js will cache the data. So it treats our data as static or unchanging data. So when rendering this page, Next.js sees that this page has static data, so it decides to render this page statically at build time. But if we disable caching, Next.js thinks the data on this page is going to change, so it's not going to render this page statically, it's going to render it at request time. To see this action, let's go back to the terminal window, stop this process. Now earlier we used npm run dev to start this application in our development server. Now to build this for production, we run npm run build. All right, here you can see all the routes that are generated when we build our application for production. So this is our root route or the home page. We have a route for our favorite icon. We have one for the users page, another for the users/new page, and so on. Now look at the icon before each of these routes. Here we only see circles. Now down here, you can see that a circle means static. So these pages are automatically rendered as static HTML. Now, if you start this application in production, which we can do by running npm start, and then go back to the browser, let's refresh. Look, the timestamp is not changing because this page was rendered statically at build time. Now back to this page, let's disable caching and rebuild this application for production. So as a second argument, we pass an options object, and here we set cache to no store. Okay, now back to the terminal. Let's stop this process and rebuild the application. Lovely. Now look at the icon before the user's route. Instead of a circle, we have a lambda. And down here, you can see that lambda means rendering on the server. So server-side renders at runtime. Now let's start the application in production. Back to the browser. Let's refresh. Now look, every time we refresh, the timestamp changes. Let's recap everything you have learned about rendering. In Next.js, rendering can happen on the client or on the server. If it happens on the server, it can happen at build time, which is called static rendering, or at request time, which is called dynamic rendering. So that brings us to the end of this section. In the next section, we'll talk about styling Next.js applications. So I will see you there. Welcome back to our Next.js course. In this section, we'll explore various ways to style our applications and make them beautiful. We'll cover global styles, CSS modules, Tailwind, and Daisy UI. So let's jump in and get started. Earlier in the course, we briefly talked about our global style sheet in the app folder. So let's open up globals.css. In this file on the top, we have 3 directives to import the base styles from Tailwind. Now we're going to talk about Tailwind later in this section, but very briefly, Tailwind is a very popular CSS framework, okay? Then after that, we have this root selector. This is where we typically define custom properties like foreground, RGB, and so on. Then we have media prefers color scheme dark. With this CSS feature, which is relatively new, we can detect if the user is in the dark mode or not. If so, you can see that the value of these custom properties is overwritten. Now down here, you can see that we have used the value of this custom property as the color of the body element. So we are not using background, start, and end RGB. They were used earlier when we had a gradient on our homepage. So before going further, let's do a bit of cleanup here. I'm going to delete these two lines and these two lines from here. And also, let's go back to the terminal and make sure that we are running this application in development. So anytime we make any changes here, we can see the changes immediately. So npm run dev. Good. Now back to this file. So this is our global style sheet, and we should use it for styles that are truly global in our application. Styles that apply to all pages, like anything to do with the body element, our headings, our hyperlinks, and so on. Anything that is specific to a page or a component, we should implement it somewhere else. So one thing you shouldn't do here is you shouldn't define custom classes like user list, because this only applies to a particular component or a page. With this approach, as we build more and more components, this global style sheet grows really large and becomes unmaintainable. And more importantly, as we change or delete our components, we'll have to remember to come back and do some cleanup here. Otherwise, over time, we'll have a lot of dead styles in this file. If you have been working with CSS for a while, you know what I'm talking about. So reserve this file for styles that are truly global. For styles that are specific to a page or a component, use CSS modules or Tailwind, which we're going to talk about next. All right, let's talk about CSS modules. A CSS module is a CSS file that is scoped to a page or a component. It's a way to prevent styles from clashing or overriding each other. If you have been working with CSS for a while, you know that if you have the same class defined in two different places in two different style sheets, these classes can override each other depending on how we import these style sheet files. CSS modules aim to solve that problem. Let's see how they work. So here in the components folder, we have a component called product card. Now let's say we want to create some styles for this component. So here we add a new file. We can call this file anything, but it's better to call it the same as the component. So product card.
Hey everyone, my name is Vishwas and welcome to this Next.js 15 crash course. Today, we are going to dive deep into the powerful world of Next.js, focusing on version 15 and understanding what makes it a great framework. So, what exactly is Next.js? It is a React framework for building full-stack web applications. When building applications with React alone, it is not feasible to create a fully featured application ready for production. React is a library for building user interfaces, responsible only for the view layer of an application. As a developer, you need to make decisions about other features such as routing, data fetching, and more. Next.js, on the other hand, is a React framework. It uses React for building user interfaces, but also provides additional features that enable you to build production-ready applications. These features include routing, optimized rendering, data fetching, bundling, compiling, and more. You don't have to install packages, as Next.js provides everything you need. However, keep in mind that Next.js, being a framework, has opinions and conventions that should be followed to implement these features. There is no need to worry though, as the conventions have emerged from a team with years of experience in writing React apps for production. So, to reiterate, Next.js is a React framework for building production-ready full-stack web applications. Whether you're a React developer looking to level up your skills, a beginner curious about Next.js, or even an experienced dev wanting to catch up with the latest in Next.js 15, this course is for you. By the end of this crash course, you will have learned how to set up a Next.js 15 project from scratch, the ins and outs of server and client components, how to use the new app router for defining pages and layouts, how Next.js handles navigation, creating API routes with Next.js, data fetching strategies, data mutation with server actions, and how to handle authentication in Next.js. What are the prerequisites? A solid grasp of HTML, CSS, and modern JavaScript. Familiarity with React fundamentals like components, props, state, and hooks is also crucial. All right, let's get started by setting up our development environment for Next.js 15. I highly encourage you to follow along with me, as that will help you get the most out of this crash course. First, make sure you have Node.js installed on your machine. Next.js 15 requires Node.js version 18.18 or later. If you need to install or update Node.js, head over to nodejs.org and download the latest stable version. For code editor, we will be using Visual Studio Code. If you don't have it installed, you can download it from code.visualstudio.com. Once Node.js and VS Code are installed, open up your terminal, Control backtick being the shortcut. We're going to use create next app, which sets up a Next.js project for you with a single command. So in the terminal, type npx space create-next-app, add latest. This will prompt you with a few questions. What is your project name? Let's call it Next.js demo. Would you like to use TypeScript? Yes. Would you like to use ESLint? Yes, it's good for catching errors early. Would you like to use Tailwind CSS? Let's say yes for this course. Would you like to use source directory? Yes, we will use the source directory structure. Would you like to use AppRouter? Definitely yes, as it's a key feature of Next.js 15. Would you like to use TurboPack? No, we don't want to. And finally, would you like to customize the default import alias? No, we'll use the default. The command takes a few seconds to run, and once the command completes, you should have a new folder called Next.js demo, which contains our Next.js application. To run this application, change into the project folder using the command cd Next.js-demo. Then run the command npm run dev. This command will set up a development server on localhost port 3000. You can control-click or command-click the provided link to open the application in your browser. You should see the Next.js welcome page with an instruction that says, get started by editing source/app/page.tsx. Save and see your changes instantly. Let's make our first edit. In VS Code, navigate to source/app and open page.tsx. I'm going to minimize the terminal with control backtick again. Here, we're going to find the second list item element and replace its text with hello world. Save the file. The changes will automatically refresh in your browser, and you should now see hello world displayed on the page. Now that we have our first Next.js 15 project up and running, let's head back to VS Code and take a closer look at its structure. At the root level, we see 4 folders and 10 files. First, we have package.json, which contains project dependencies such as Next version 15, React and React DOM version 19, as well as scripts like dev, build, start, and lint. Next, we have several configuration files. The next.config.ts file is used for Next.js configuration. We use tsconfig.json for TypeScript settings. The ESLint RC.json file configures ESLint for our project. For Tailwind CSS, we have both tailwind.config.ts and postcss.config.mjs. We also have packagelock.json, gitignore, readme, and nextenv.d.ts, but these aren't significant for our crash course.